So speaking of just, entertaining ideas, do you think the American dream is a myth, or do you think it doesn't exist anymore?
I don't think it's a myth because I do believe it existed at one point. I think, I guess it depends on what your definition is of the American dream. If your definition, at least how I understand it, is it's like, what is it? It's a white picket fence house with 2.5 kids and a car and the atomic family, that sort of thing. I think that has gone by the wayside. I think it's morphed into something else. I don't know what that something else is, and I don't know if that even qualifies as a dream. I think the American dream may have died and became an American nightmare. But what do
That's
you
a good.
think?
So my version of an American dream is, and this is before you had your major, let's just say your huge population growth and all this other kind of stuff, but sort of the same. I mean, you have your white picket fence, but you have a house. You actually own a house or a piece of property that is yours that you live on. You do have a family or whatever that, term for you obviously means, because not everyone wants to have kids, but you have a family, you have a house that's yours, two cars. Um, you weren't struggling to pay your bills every single month. Um, and we're obviously going to get into it, but when you look at the average household income in the U.S., the average is, I think it was 59,000.
It's lower than a lot of people realize it is.
Yeah, it is. And it's impossible to sustain on one income unless that person is making a lot of money and you're living not like you're making that money. And we're gonna talk about what that looks like. We're gonna get into that, but the American dream also too, to me, is the promise that you're gonna always keep going forward, as far as like whether it be in your job or just in your life. Like there's always gonna be like that forward motion or that mobility to move up in the chain. And I don't think that really exists anymore. And so, yeah.
I think that's interesting. I didn't really consider the part of being able to progress through the hierarchy of whatever your profession is. But I think that part has definitely died in certain job sectors. I don't know when it began, I guess, but the erosion in maybe like the 80s and 90s, when we used to start to offshore jobs, like a lot of the manufacturing jobs. Because I feel used to, like, I don't know the actual stats, you can Google it, but I know at one point in time, you used to, maybe like in probably the 50s and 60s, you could just graduate high school, not go off to college, get a good job at a good warehouse, and then be able to buy a house and support, like, the atomic 4-person family at that point without going to college. Like, whereas now, like, the college degree has become the new high school degree, the master's degree has become the new college degree. And it's so expensive. Like any year you throw out what it costs to go to college, it's just going to be more expensive the next year. And so that stat's just going to change. But it's tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, depending on if it's public or private or what time of year you decide to go,
Well, I mean, I would even argue to say that that all started pre-50s and 60s. I mean, if you take out the fact that we had the wars going on throughout the early 1900s, it was still fairly easy back then to get a house, have a wife, have a couple kids, and you have a car, and you could all do that on, $20,000 a year, $30,000 a year, if people actually made that much. Because and when you look at and I'm going to touch on a couple things that you mentioned too, but when it comes to the amount of income that people made, I've seen numerous videos and I read numerous articles that when you look back in the 70s and the 80s, the people who bought their first house bought their houses for $16,000, $17,000, and they only made $30,000 because you could sustain that, and that was perfectly fine. But when you equate that amount of income to today's time to afford the prices for like what the lowest price home would be, that is a fully functioning home, which I think the average home price is, I think, $350 to $385 starting out. You have to make $160,000 a year, I think is what they said, to actually to qualify, and that's like with like very low debt to income ratio, like all this other stuff. Now, we're gonna go deeper into this, and honestly, we could probably have a whole episode just on this. But let's talk about college for a second. So, well, and I'd love to hear about your experience with this, but mine personally, I went to college. Went to a community college, got a degree in something that isn't even useful in today's society, and don't worry, that's not even just my degree. That's a lot of degrees nowadays. But mine isn't relevant to today's time. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to school. My wife couldn't go to school, financial aid, like a whole issue with that. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to school and bounced around trying to figure out what major I want to do. Finally landed on graphic design. Well, I was dealing with academic probation. Like I was working a lot and I focused a lot on my classes. But I was told by one advisor that, hey, all you have to do is just get a 2.0 GPA this semester and you'll be back in good standing. I was like, okay, cool, easy enough. I put in the work. I got the 2.0. Well, I went and talked to another advisor to set my classes up for the next semester, and they were like, you actually needed a 2.25 GPA accumulatively. And I was like, that's not what the other advisor told me. And the first advisor that told me that was the head of the art department, which is the department that I'd be doing most of my classes in. And so I pretty much told that, advisor, like, hey, y'all can keep that piece of paper. And this is the nice way. Y'all can keep that piece of paper. And I got up and I walked out of that office. Because they wanted me to pull out more student loans. I was like, I'm not going to go further into debt for this. Well, that's my experience. And again, I'd like to hear yours here in a second, but college degrees, it went from being, like you said, the high school diploma is now your bachelor's degree and so on and so forth. Well, it's actually getting to a point today where a lot of companies aren't even requiring a degree. They'll just hire you and just pay you, or you don't even use your degree for what you're actually doing for work. So that's just been what I've seen and what I've talked with a lot of people about. So I'd love to hear your take on the college experience and degrees and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. So first thing, just I got curious of when we were talking about just what was like the average household income back in the, say, early 20th century. So in the 1930s, albeit this was during the Great Depression, the average household income was around $1,300 to $1,500 a year. Just that. So
I was way off then.
I know, but it's crazy to also think about how much inflation and just the cost of things have gone up since then. Just knowing that the average household had around $1,300 to $1,500 in the 1930s, at least, coming in per year. And I was assuming they were employed during the Great Depression. In terms of college, I took out federal loans and got the ability to get like the Pell Grant and things like that. So, needless to say, sucking on the teat of the federal government until I pay those off. It wasn't too bad in comparison to other people I had in my friend group and people I grew up with that went off to other universities. I went to a state school. It also wasn't a state school that was terribly expensive in comparison to, let's say, like the University of Texas at Austin. That's a rather expensive school. Even though it's a state school, there are additional charges that go on top of that, or your private universities, which, that gets into the six figures per year. Especially, it's only gone up since I've known the numbers. I haven't bothered to look at the numbers in the last, 5+ years, more than that, honestly. But, I go back and forth with what I think about my experience, because I guess on paper, you could say, no, I do not use my degree in my profession today. However, there are moments where I appreciate the experiences and the pathway I took to get where I am today. Like, I wouldn't go back and change it. There was probably a point immediately after graduating where I probably thought, I didn't need this. Why the heck did I just take out all this loans, and why did I spend all this money on this? But nowadays, like hindsight 2020, I think it happened the way it happened for a reason. However, I know not everyone's experience is universally the same.
Yeah.
Because really, the amount of loans I ended up having to pay off was just like buying a nice car, basically. I don't have too much more left on them, but at the time, it was like, okay, you bought a nice Mercedes in terms of like dollar value.
Yeah.
So, but at the time, I mean, I started off as a journalism major, and then I went to be a history major. And so that's basically what I graduated with. Now, I don't use that. I appreciate the information and the context it gave me. It taught me a lot of things about how to, how to study, how to prepare for things, how to present, how to write well, how to pretend to speak well, things like that. But yeah,
Well,
long story short, I don't know if that's a good answer or not.
Yeah, no. I mean, just from my experience because we've known each other for a while, so it's like, I definitely say that, the way you speak and the way you present yourself, definitely has helped you out in that regard. And I was looking up something just while you were talking, but this is just for UNT, and this is for the 2023-2024 academic year. This is the average cost of attendance, tuition fees, housing, food, book supplies, transportation, and personal costs. So this isn't including, this isn't like what I pay, but this is what someone that...
This is the prototypical freshman living on campus, eating on campus.
Yes. For an entire year, it's $27,937. And that's for a year.
That definitely sounds more expensive than I remember.
I paid for not living on campus. Don't get me wrong, bartending and serving, I was making good money. So, occasionally I would get lunch because I'd be on campus all day. I didn't want to, even though I lived close, I didn't want to go all the way home and then come back. So I stayed on campus. So I got lunch a couple times a week. Granted, I only had classes on a couple days a week as well. But my first semester I think I did 15 hours a semester. I started around $6,000. The very last semester that I took classes there had gone up $2,000. And now you're looking at this, and this is for an average freshman. Now that's for residents of the state of Texas. Now you look at the residents of out of state, $40,000, over almost $41,000 for an out of state tuition. Now, why are we talking about this? Well, going into the American dream, I don't know if you do you know who Dave Ramsey is? I would assume you do.
Oh yes, I'm very well aware.
A lot of people know who Dave Ramsey is. A lot of people think that he is full of it. A lot of people actually take some of the stuff that he says and actually utilize it, and it works for them. I am kind of in the middle because some of his stuff, it's kind of hard for people in our particular situation to do the stuff that he says to do to get out of the debt and to continue growing, because on one hand, you have one partner who is struggling to find a new job that will actually pay her worth. And on the other hand, you have someone who's an entrepreneur who is a realtor who is dealing with the current market trends right now and is growing their business. Now, when you look at college students, one of the main things that he does is he talks about people getting out of debt, and he deals with student debt and credit card debt and all that kind of stuff. Well, I've been seeing a lot of people lately who, especially in the last 2 years, and you as well, I'm sure, but the student loan relief programs, things like that. Now, I'm a firm believer in certain cases that if you go to school for, I'm just throwing these three out there because these are three more prominent ones, but if you go to school for engineering, in the medical field, or in the law, like lawyering or anything like that, the amount of money that you can make from any of those three, you should have to pay off your student loans. I'm sorry, but that's my honest opinion about that, because those jobs that you can get in those fields can definitely make you money. Now, here's where the American dream falls into that. People want the American dream, but they want the American dream before they pay off those student loans. So therefore, they live a life that is above their means, and then they complain because they can't pay off their student loans. So they want to drive the expensive car because it matches their profile for being a doctor or surgeon or whatever the case may be. They want to drive. And I know for medical field, you have to go through residency, so you get paid lower than what your standard doctors would get paid because you're actually going through that program, and you do it while you're in college too. But then lawyers, they want to drive the Mercedes, the Lexus, the more expensive cars. Engineers, that's a toss-up because, some engineers will drive if you're a mechanical engineer, then you might drive the worst-looking vehicle ever because you know how to fix it up. So it varies. But I've been reading a lot of articles, and I've watched a lot of Dave Ramsey, and I hear some of the stories that people talk about where they're like, our combined income is $350,000 a year, and our student loans are $230,000, but we can't pay them off. You can, you just want to live like you're making $350,000. So the American dream, I kind of agree with you. I don't think it's dead, but I think that people either try to get ahead or the people that are already behind can't seem to catch up to what's happening. If that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I think there's a lot to unpack there. So I think one thing that came to mind was keeping up with the Joneses. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Where I think it comes out of like suburbia America, probably in the 40s and 50s, when, you know, you see your neighbors, they get the new, I don't know, at the time, maybe a new Mustang or Corvette. And so you get jealous and you think you have to keep up with it. You see your neighbor get the new TV, so you have to get the new TV. And I think one thing that screws people over today, maybe not screws them over, but puts them at a disadvantage, is credit is so easy today. Where if you rewind 50 years, like, yeah, there was credit, there was layaway, but also like credit, the concept of getting a credit card, it existed, but it was nowhere near as easy, and limits were much more strict than they were today, to where I remember the first credit card I got, I think it had like a $12,000 limit, and I was senior year college, and thankfully I was blessed with knowing that a credit card still had to be paid off. Like, it's not free money, where some people find themselves thinking it's free, unlimited money, which blows my mind every time. Someone did them a disservice at some point in their life. But like, as a senior in college, you shouldn't be getting a $12,000 credit limit. That makes no sense. Like, think about, you don't have to disclose this, but like, think about how many credit cards you potentially have. Now combine the limits, like the maximum limit of all of those. That's probably a large number. Should you have the ability to go accidentally or impulsively buy something with that much money?
So I mean, honestly, I don't mind disclosing it. So I don't have an actual, like, you know, like, I don't have your, like the Chase credit cards. Like, I don't have any of those. So I've got the Cabela's card, the club membership card.
You would have the Cabela's card. I get it.
That was the first credit card I got. Started out with an $8,000 limit. Now I have a $12,000 limit. It's paid off. I just recently paid it off. Like, I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. And for those of you who might be watching, they do have interest rates. A lot of credit cards will offer 0% financing or interest rates for your first year, and it is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. But after that first year ended and you start seeing that interest and you're trying to catch up, but you just can't seem to catch up, and it seems so easy to just spend that money on that credit card because you don't want to spend the cash right then. You're like, I could just pay it off and make payments. Don't do that.
Because the interest rate hits you at like 20%, and it's
and
death
like
spiral.
18 to 25%. Like, and so it was bad. The other credit, and the first credit card actually I think I got was a Best Buy credit card. It was like a $2,000 limit. Wasn't large, but it was, you know, I got it because I bought a TV. So it's things like that. Now I don't have that card anymore. I even canceled my Academy card. I got it impulsively. I was like, I don't even need this. I don't want to use it. The only reason I got it is because they're like, oh, you can get discounts on ammo when you buy it. And I was like, really? And so I got it. Never hardly ever used it. And then I got the Shields Visa credit card. I don't even use that one. I'm pretty sure it's going to deactivate at some point because they send me notices and they're like, if you don't use your card, we're going to deactivate it. And I'm like, okay, like, I'll just go apply for another one and get the, you know, $150 off my purchase that day and go buy like, you know, $300 worth of stuff. And I'm only paying $150. So it's like, I might do that. Who knows? But as far as credit cards though, like it's like you said, it's so easy to get them now. You know, they push them on people because they're like, oh my gosh, you can get all this free money. And I've actually seen videos where people talk about that as being free money. And I'm like, it's not free money. You're going to have to pay that back. And I've seen some people where they just rack up credit card debt and student debt. And they're like, I'm not going to pay that back. I'm just not. And they're honest about it. And I'm like, why do you do that then? Because you're not going to be able to do a whole lot as far as what you'd like to do. Now, I've got some other stuff I'll go into about, you know, credit and stuff like that, but continue what you were saying though.
Oh, I don't remember what I was going to say. I think I was going to mention something about, think about how many credit card offers you probably get, like junk mail, right? How many of those you get? I get a ton It's
Yeah.
probably because I'm on a bunch of lists because I've bought things over time, but like I think I at least probably get, not exaggerating, 15 to 20 per month. It is from all the big players. And it'd be so easy. You're quote unquote pre-qualified just to go get money. Basically, you're gonna have to pay it off, but the whole 0% interest for like a year or whatever that introductory offer is, but then they snag it. They catch you because they get you spending money on it. You forget about it because you don't have to pay it off for the full year. And then once you hit that second year, boom, 16-20% interest. And with the way the economy's headed, like those interest rates are only going to go up probably over time. So people that have found themselves on like in the rat race of trying to pay that, they're never going to catch up.
Yeah. And it's funny though, because you have different levels of credit cards. I mean, like when you look at Chase, I mean, you have business credit cards, you have your Emerald, your Sapphire, all these other different kinds. Some of them don't have a year fee, but some of them do have a yearly fee.
Yeah.
Granted, I've never had one. I've thought about getting one, but obviously not right now. I mean, but I've thought about getting one for business purposes, like to get the free miles and to rack up the miles to use for, whatever really. But it's at this point, it's not something that I'm like, I need to have this credit card. Like, my advice for anyone who's listening, if you can live without having a credit card, don't get one. And that's not me just because I listened to Dave Ramsey, but if you have one, literally only use it for emergencies only. Like, don't use it for anything else. Like, if you have health insurance and you need to go to the hospital and you got to pay a deductible, use the credit card for that if you don't want to pay the cash right off the bat. Like,
but what if my emergency is I want that new 72-inch flat screen TV? It's an emergency. I need it like now.
You better be able to watch like every single game like on the same screen, like for Sports Center, NFL Red Zone and all that stuff. Like, you better be able to watch all of it. Like, you better be able to like have every game displayed, and then you can scroll through and click on whichever game you want to click on if that's the size TV that you're going to get. Like,
what's wild, though, I think now that YouTube TV has NFL Sunday Ticket, I think that is going to be like something here in the near future, is the ability to literally interact with every game on the same screen rather than having to like flip between.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely coming.
I could see that happening, but yeah, I mean, there's as far as the American dream though, I just think about how the inability for a lot of people. Like, when you look at just the social status of everyone, like, and I'll kind of lead in with this, the middle class does not exist anymore. Like, you're either low class, like you either like make below this amount or you make above that amount. Like, there's no in between. There's no middle class anymore. And I say that because a lot of jobs nowadays, like, unless you've already got like that level in your job, no one else is going to, like, you're not going to get hired at that level. Like, a lot of people want to keep people at the entry level jobs. Like, they make jobs to where you can't go up that ladder anymore to make more money. And if you do get a pay raise, you get a 3% pay raise at the end of the year if you do a really good job. And I feel like that's why you've been seeing a lot of people that will job hop and work at one job for 1 year or 2 years and then go to the next job because the best pay raise is a new job. And I've heard that saying over the past like 3 to 4 years.
It is kind of messed up that is true to a certain extent. It is unfortunate. What's crazy, I know I sent you this article, but I'm going to see if you remember the number off the top of your head. If not, no worries, because I have it in front of me. Do you know how much it cost as of December 2023 to have the American dream? Like, how much? They put a dollar figure on it. Do you remember how much it is to have the American dream?
It wasn't. I don't think it was above 200,000. I could be wrong though, but it was above the 100. It was above the threshold to buy a house, I believe, in today's economy.
Well, I'm talking about just like, what is the price tag for the American dream?
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it was in between the 150 to 200,000.
$3.4 million to have the American dream.
Yeah, I was way off.
Yeah.
Now,
what I can
what is
do,
your definition of the American dream, though?
Yeah, I can actually show you. Let me,
because I don't remember everything about the article, but I remember small, minute details.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let me pull that up real quick. Okay. So the American dream costing $3.4 million. Investopedia did an article on this. anyone that's listening, you can find this article really at any other publication, like CBS has it, NBC's got it, almost everybody. But they do a breakdown on here. So the American Dream now costs $3.4 million. That's an estimated lifetime cost of common milestones, including marriage, 2 children, homes, healthcare, cars, and education. The cost of raising 2 children to the age of 18 is now estimated at over $500,000, at $576,896. The average lifetime cost of a home, including a mortgage, with a 10% down payment and a 30-year fixed rate of 7.2%, is now about $796,998, according to Investopedia's analysis. It's a fun little graphic on here, but they do a breakdown of all of this here. Let me zoom in to make this easier to read. So, like the milestones, so hospital, individual costs, about $5,700. Raising children to 18, about $576,000. Car purchases, $271,300. Now that's assuming average purchase price for used cars, total shown for 10 purchases, 6-year-old used car lasting around 6 years each over a lifetime, driving ages 16 to 18 years old. Cost of college, $42,070. That's including, or that's assuming cost of 1 year at a public in-state 4-year institution, including room and board. Wedding, $35,800. That's a wild number. Doesn't surprise me because people in New York and LA probably spend stupid amounts of money. That's crazy. Home, $796,000, $998. But that's looking at the average purchase price for a home with lifetime mortgage cost, assuming 10% down payment, 30-year fixed loan at 7.2% interest. Does not include other costs, including taxes, origination and lender charges, etc. Cost of pets. So, you got to get the family dog or cat, right? $67,935. That includes the lifetime care of 15 years for a dog and cat. Health insurance, which you got to have in this country. You just can't live without health insurance to some extent. Just under $1 million at $934,752. Now, once you're done working, you got to, you want to have some kind of a retirement, right? So that's going to be $715,968. That's 80% of 2022 median household income. Let's see here. And then funeral costs, because they got to put you on the ground or do something with you, right? $7,848. And they continue to do a whole breakdown in here of some of the analysis and where they pull the numbers from. But yeah, if you're going to put a price tag on it, $3.4 million just to have the quote unquote American dream. Now, when I look at this, I understand the logic behind how they pulled the numbers. But even though I know, and I'm reading through this, it sounds like the American nightmare, because I don't think this is attainable for the vast majority of the American public. Definitely attainable by what you would consider like the upper middle class and above, because it is $3.4 million over your lifespan. A lot of people don't realize, like, if you invest correctly, like in a Roth IRA, and you spend your money accordingly, and you do relatively well in life, you'll technically have millions of dollars that you would have spent at some point in time by the time you're put in the ground. But I don't know, like, what does that seem logical to you? Like, what are you thinking?
And I'm going to ask you a question after I kind of say what I'm going to say, but just my opinion on this, as far as kids go, I'm either or. I mean, me and my wife have had conversations about it, but we don't really look like we're going to have kids at all. So as far as that goes, I mean, we're already down to 2.9 million. So we're good on that. College, neither of us had that. Our wedding cost half of what that average cost. As far as a home, anyone who's listening out there, I can find you a good home that is like, $300,000. I'm just saying that right there. I'm just putting that little selfless plug in there right now.
Something that's interesting, not to interrupt you, but one thing I think we'll see in our lifetime for our generation, I think a lot of people are going to be grappling with the reality of how much it costs to live in cities. And when I say cities, I mean the New Yorks, the Miamis, the Los Angeles, the Seattles, the Dallas, like formally in a city. What I'm curious to see is if we'll see like a movement of people seeing a ripe opportunity to move to a Tulsa, Oklahoma, a Lincoln, Nebraska, Durango, Colorado, like places that are typically small cities, but are affordable because they're like, good example would be Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right? They got an NFL team. They got an MLB team. They have an actual downtown. They're part of like the Rust Belt. So there's a lot of infrastructure there, but costs have gone so down because that's not like a hip city to be in for tech. Now it's kind of becoming hip because I've heard a lot of artists are moving there and whatnot.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, are people going to wake up and say, like, I can't afford to live, even though I want to live in Dallas or Austin, Texas, but they're going to end up living somewhere else?
I mean, I could see that, but the reason why I could see that is because the way that we see people come to Texas right now. So like, just for an example, Denton County has 236 people moving to Denton County every day. I could be wrong on that number. I think it might be like in the 70s.
It's growing fast.
And so the amount of people that are moving here and the amount of growth that when you look at Dallas and you see that growth that's just going up through Frisco, Carrollton, Little Elm, like all these areas over there, the colony, and eventually it's going to hit us, like we're already seeing that growth. And so I could see, and I've already been seeing an influx too of what people's American dream is just not the large house, not the big, $500,000 house, but they'd rather go and spend $250, get a nice small house on a small piece of land, like a few acres, and homestead. And the thing is, the term homesteading, it's what people call it today, but homesteading is what people used to do, hundreds of years ago. Like, that's actually how they lived. They grew their own food. They harvested their own stuff. They had animals. They did everything themselves. And that's just what they called living. To me, I mean, that, and I'll go into kind of what my, dream would look like, but when you look at just the amount of people who are moving everywhere and people who can't attain that affordability anymore, and people are realizing it, things are not getting any more affordable. And unless you have a six-figure income combined in a household, or if you're a single person, you have a six-figure income, almost impossible to really do anything. Like, you have to really budget your money out. And even then, like, we budget our money every single month. I know exactly how much we pay on all of our bills. We still spend more than what we make every month because of the amount of gas that I have to spend driving around, the amount of money I spend on marketing, taking out clients, all this other kind. Like, I spend so much money because that's owning a business, like that's just how it is. And so we've talked, we've discussed all of that and just looking at what the American dream would look like. And some people are fortunate, people who have that piece of land, who grew into that, and like their families owned it and they're going to get it. Like, you're lucky. And my advice is don't sell. Keep it, because you're probably never going to find anything like that again or get lucky to have anything like that ever again. And a lot of people nowadays are realizing that, the amount of apartments that are being built everywhere, like apartment complexes want to charge you the same price per month as what a $250,000 house would cost you per month. But yet those same people who approve you for that apartment also don't want to approve you for that home that you're trying to get because your credit's too low. But yet, it's the same thing. So it's like they don't want people to have that. I think personally they're trying to create a country and move towards a country that is full of renters. Buying a house will not be feasible for anyone, I feel. And this is coming from a realtor, and I could be completely wrong. People out there that study this way more than me. But I give it like 15 years, and you would have to make at least $200,000 a year to afford any kind of home with the amount of inflation that's going to happen over the course of that next 10 to 15 years. If nothing gets into place soon, if nothing changes soon. And that's just because, like, we've already seen that. Like, home prices are already going up. Like I said, the average home price is, I think, $365. And that's the average home price in America now. And if 10 to 15 years from now, especially with everyone moving to certain specific areas in the country, the more people you have here, the more subdivisions that are being built, the more areas that are being built up, like land's being bought up, and more houses are going to be put there. They can't catch up on the housing market. Like, so that right there tells you that the American dream is not attainable for everyone, because they can't even catch up on the amount of houses that we need for everyone to have a house.
I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head when you were talking about renting versus owning. Because there's a famous phrase, and you can Google it. Anyone listening can Google it if this doesn't sound familiar to you. You will own nothing and be happy. There, I believe, and I know others believe this as well, there is a concerted effort to ensure that you will own nothing. Everything in your life will be leased, will be rented, but don't worry because you'll be happy. And where I'm really referencing that from, there is an article, technically I think it's a blog post, that the World Economic Forum, WEF, posted. I think maybe about 2 years ago now. Could have been 3 years ago. I forget, time flies. But it's, you will own nothing and you will be happy. Did you find it? I saw it looked like you were Googling there.
Yeah, so I couldn't find the actual article, but Wikipedia, the phrase originated in 2016.
2016, man, time flies.
Now, again, we're not going to go back to the topics that we had a couple weeks ago or even last week, but think about the events that have happened since 2016. Just think about how much has happened in our country since 2016.
Yeah. One other thing that stuck out to me that I was looking up to get the stats on was, I forget what you mentioned. Oh, homesteading. You were talking about homesteading and how, you know, that's basically what living used to be. And now people are kind of going full circle in the terms of, you know, going back to homesteading. And I remember seeing a stat on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter, a couple days ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, I forget. And it was talking about the percentage of Americans that used to grow their own food, or a percentage of their own food, versus those that don't in like modern day. And if you go back to the 1940s, roughly 40% of Americans were growing their own food for consumption, whereas nowadays less than 5% do. It's very telling. Now, of course, there were other events and things causing people to grow their own food in the 40s and 30s. I mean, you had a world war, you had a depression, things that would cause people maybe not to go out to restaurants, but also people had to be a little more self-reliant, reliant, because, you know, you didn't have McDonald's yet. You didn't have fast food.
Yeah.
Fast food wasn't a concept yet. Microwaves didn't exist yet. Simple things like that. Whereas today, I know the dollar menu doesn't really exist because of inflation, but you basically have the dollar menu where you can go spend $1, get a burger, etc. Is it a good burger? To be debated. But this is very interesting how nobody grows their own food anymore. But I like the idea of being able to have like a backyard garden, even if you don't grow the entirety of your food, maybe just like, I don't know, spinach and peppers and oregano and
like potatoes, carrots, like just like the smaller things,
watermelon, you know, fun things.
And it's funny though, because like, so my mother-in-law, she has like, you know, few things that she grows, you know, nothing large, like blueberries, like smaller things like that. And like they've got 10 acres of land, so it's like, you know, if we ever just decided to move way out of the city and we decided just, you know, say, you know what, we're going back home, like we would have a place to build a house if we need to, you know, like, and I'm pretty sure they would be completely fine with that. But
do you ever daydream about that?
What?
Do you ever daydream about doing that?
Like moving back home?
Yeah, just saying screw it, like going back to, like, for lack of a better term, the country.
Dude.
Just doing it.
So part of me doesn't want to, because we built a life here on our own.
I get that.
We've come to know so many people, and I know for a fact that if we moved back home, I would never probably have contact with any of those people ever again. And so I couldn't do that. But when we decided to talk about the American dream, and I'm going somewhere with this. My American dream is having like a 2 to 5 acre piece of land. Honestly, I don't even need 5 acres. The only reason I would need 5 acres is because you can get certain exemptions if you have minimum 5 acres. But 2 acres would be big enough for us because we could build a decent sized home, nothing crazy, and then we'd have space to grow our own food, like a few specific things. We'd have space to have some chickens, like things like that, you know, to have certain fresh food, and, you know, and a few other things, you know. But that dream is unattainable for a lot of people. And there's a lot, like you said, the 5%, like 5% of people grow their own food. And I can say right now, I'm not a huge fan of, you know, really going to fast food places. Like very rarely do we go eat anywhere fast food. And if we do, it's Chick-fil-A. That's like the only, maybe that and occasionally Wendy's, but Chick-fil-A is like the standard. Like you go there and
Chick-fil-A is great.
And so we don't do fast food anymore. You know, it's like we very rarely even go out to eat at restaurants anymore either. Like we eat all of our own food at home. Now I'm not saying what we eat at home, it's like, you know, the hell, I mean, we buy frozen chicken, we meal prep it, we still eat canned foods and stuff like that. But the goal is to get to some point where, hey, we can now self-sustain and kind of grow some of our own stuff and whatnot. Now, to answer your question, would I want to go back home? Part of me wants to say yes, because life is so much simpler when you're not dealing with what you deal with in the city. Like it just seems so much easier. And people say like, oh, like life is so hard today. Well, to be fair, even though people back in the 30, like when they used to live on farms and stuff and grow their own stuff, like, yeah, life was simple for them as far as like, you know, how they live, because they didn't have everything we had. But life was also very hard for them, because if they didn't harvest their crops, or a storm happened or something like that, like that was their food supply. So it's like, you know, that's kind of where I'm at with that. I was looking something up though, since we were talking about like money stuff and things like that and finances. But this was based on an article on Forbes back in 2023. 78% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and that's up 6% from the previous year. Now this was an article that was written earlier this year, talking about last year. But that just kind of gives you, and there's a bunch of different articles, like CNBC says 62%, but let's just say it's anywhere from 65 to 75% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And go ahead.
No, yeah, that's exactly, I think, why they had to give out those checks during COVID, because if they didn't, there goes the economy. It does a 180 and it just implodes on itself. Because really, in my opinion, I think the vast majority of this economy is built on debt note to debt note. You're just kicking the can, just paying off the next debt, taking out more debt, et cetera, all the way from the top down. Now, that's not mutually exclusive to everybody that's involved in the process, but think about if someone's out of work for 2 to 4 weeks, if there isn't that unemployment check to collect, they're done. That's it. Like, and it's crazy. I mean, I don't know what we talked about. I think it was in the very first podcast episode when we were talking about Texas and just the unhoused populations that are continuing to grow. You would just see that tenfold if people didn't get the money when they did. Just because people really are living paycheck to paycheck. The vast majority of people are. Terrifying to think about. Like, I get it, but that would stress me out too much. Like, I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of people, and it blew my mind though how many people were thinking like, oh, that was just free money. There's no such thing as free money.
No.
Like, we're currently paying for that still right now till this day. We're paying for all the stimulus checks that got sent out to everybody.
Well, it was like the amount of US dollars. Okay, so it's so much more has happened since then too, because Ukraine and literally everything else is going on in the world. But during that point in time, let me remember if I get this stat correct, because and I can pull up a graph too to show this visually. It was like, I remember in like 2021 or 22, the stat was like more dollars were printed in the last year than the last 100 years combined. If you look at is it the M1 money supply? US dollar M1 money supply. And you go to images to pull up a graph of it. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I can pull it up directly from, oh wait, can I actually pull it up directly on the Fed's website? That would be hype. Yeah, the St. Louis Fed. Oh, this is gorgeous. Okay, well, let me share my screen real quick, because this is a wild stat I love to show people. Let me bring this up real quick. Okay, cool. So this is a graph. This is like directly from the Federal Reserve, the St. Louis Fed to be specific here. This is the M1 money supply. So this is money that's like out there on the markets. And you can see the line graph here of the amount of US dollars out on the market. And this is in billions. So when you see like, it looks like 1,500, it's really 1.5 billion. Look at right when 2020 happened. Look at how much money was printed. That is a ridiculous amount of money. That just can't happen without repercussion. And I think we are just at the cusp of truly understanding how detrimental that is to the rest of our lives. It is wild just to look at this graph. Now, it has come down a little bit, but there's nowhere near back down to where we were in like November 2019, February 2020. For those listening, just to give you some numbers here. So if we go back to like, I'll give you some timestamps here. This goes all the way back to like 1950, basically. But if we go like 1970, we're looking at $205 million in the money supply. If we go to 2005, we're at 1.3 billion. So naturally, it's a slight increase over time. Inflation, we get off the silver and gold standard. You got to have more paper dollars floating out there. If we let's look at February 2020. This is just before the U.S. really had its peak oh shit moment, for lack of a better term. In February 2020, we had $3.9 billion in the M1 money supply. In July of that same year, we had $16 billion. And then if you go to April of 2022, you had 20.6 billion. That's billion with a B. So we went in less than 100 years. Like, this doesn't even go back to 1920. But if we, like, I don't know, let's go like 20 years back. If we went to 2000, and let's do March to be fair here. March 2000, 1.1 billion. March 2020. Okay, 4.2, but then you go to July, 16.7. Like, it's just it's like a rocket ship taking off. Yeah. I'll get off my soapbox, but it's crazy.
No, you're good. Now, my question is, though, do you think, now, as far as like national debt, so I actually have it pulled up right here because I was just curious because like I know it's constantly going up over time. But do you know what our national debt currently is right now?
It's a silly number. It's like okay, so let me give context. So I remember back in high school, it was a big deal when it crossed like I think 10 trillion. Now, if I remember, I haven't looked at it in a second. Is it like $38 trillion?
It's 34,578,000,000,032,221,509.
Wait, tell me. Tell me the number one more time. 34 trillion?
Yeah, 34 trillion.
Okay, let's just say 34 trillion. So,
and we're doing this real time, by the way, guys.
So, like, how many years is 34 trillion? Let's relate this 34 trillion US dollars. If a second was $1, 34 trillion seconds is approximately 1 million years. That's wild. Because like when you get above billions, honestly, even billions is hard to grapple with, like just the pure amount of that. But just another $34 trillion. If each dollar is a second of time, that's over 1 million years.
Yep.
You can't pay that off. That's just you got to assume that's never going to be paid off.
Now, let's just take out the national debt. Let's just take that out for a second. If you talk about just COVID, like what happened with COVID that caused everything, like the skyrocket of the amount of money that was printed, do you think as a country we'll ever get over that?
I think even before that, I don't think there was a path of viability to pay that off. And I think everyone kind of knows that. The people that are really pulling the strings, I think they all know, like, it's never gonna get paid off. Because who's gonna come collect? You know, like we owe the debts of multiples of countries. Like, it's all over the place. Some more than others, but who's gonna collect? Like, who's gonna come knock on the door? Who's gonna be the debt collector? That's gonna come to the U.S. Fed and be like, "Hey guys, you owe us money," and we're gonna be like, "Cool, we'll hit you up in 50 years." Like, you think you can?
I actually have another question because this just popped into my head. I've seen videos of people talking about this kind of stuff. Do you think it would be possible? And this kind of goes into like, you know, if people really want the American dream that bad, if people, I think a lot of people just don't even really care anymore. Let me just kind of start off with that. I don't think a lot of people really care about the American dream anymore. They're just trying to survive at this point. and I feel that 100%. I feel that we're just trying to survive. Like, would I like to have that little house on the prairie kind of thing? Sure, but I think a lot of people are just trying to survive. Now, I asked this question because this probably could play a part in, like, hey, like, our government needs to fix stuff. Like, we need to get things back to where they were in a sense, but I feel like it might be too far gone. But what do you think would happen if every adult American citizen stopped paying taxes?
That's a good question. I mean, Social Security would be done. So anyone living off of Social Security wouldn't receive any more money unless the Fed printed more. I mean, that could technically happen because really, for those listening, if you didn't know, like the US dollar, it's a note. It's not real. Like, you can literally read it and it says it's a federal note. It's not backed up by anything other than theoretically the power of the US military and maybe the fact that the majority of oil and gas sales occur with the US dollars. It used to be mutually exclusive. Now it's not. I don't know what would happen, honestly. I mean, it would be interesting to see occur. I think it would be scary, though, because a lot of things because tax dollars do fund some things. Like, they fund the majority of what's going on. Now, it's not always handled accordingly. Like, yeah, there's mismanagement of funds, but it does fund some very pivotal things, I think Social Security would be the one that would hit people the hardest, those that rely on that check.
Because overall, I mean, and there's so much that we could talk about that could branch off into other topics that we've touched on tonight. But just overall, as far as people attaining some form of the American dream, like, and to be fair, I think the term American dream can be universal. It can be whatever somebody thinks the American dream is. Like, the standard as to what we brought up earlier in the episode is, your white picket fence, your family, your cars, your house, like the whole shebang. Like, that's the standard, in college, all that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of people's American dream could be like, I'm cool living in my 2-bedroom apartment with my 6 cats and, doing whatever you want to do kind of thing. And then some people are like, hey, like, I enjoy living in my apartment, but I have a boat that I go out and I do fishing tournaments, or I have a buddy who does that, so I'm using that as an example. So it's like, I think everyone has their own definition of what the American dream is, but I think that the people who want more can't attain more because of how the current economy is set up now. And so it's like I said, if you're already that far behind and like you can't figure out how to catch up, then there's just really there's no way to catch up. And I feel, or like, it's hard to see that light at the end of that tunnel, essentially.
Yeah. So how do you fix it?
That's a good question. That's
the $1 trillion question, right?
That is because, and this is just, like I said, like, when you apply for a job and the job doesn't hire you, okay, cool. You're still stuck making below $40,000 a year, working 40 plus hours a week. Cause that used to be it. You'd work 40 hours a week. You could make, especially in the 70s and 80s, you work 40 hours a week. You make $30,000 a year. You could live off that. Now you work 40 to 50 hours a week. You're still making $40,000 a year, and you can't even afford anything besides a 2-bedroom apartment or even sometimes a 1-bedroom apartment. Like, the thing is we think it's bad here in Texas. People up in New York are living in studio apartments that cost them $3,000 a month, and they're barely making ends meet in a lot of cases. So I'll be honest, I don't know. I think the question starts with, infrastructure as a whole. I mean, it's a lot of people have to take their own destiny into their own hands, but at the end of the day, if you're gate kept at every turn, then what are you supposed to do? Like, what can you do?
That's a good question. That is a very good question. I think one thing that feeds into the idea of the American dream that I don't know who's going to figure it out or fix it, but housing costs have to come down. I don't know how. I think there's so many factors that play into it. I mean, you have the lenders, first of all, those that lend the money. You have landowners, whether that be developers, home builders, etc., how they price that. Um, you have private equity and large institutions that like to come in and buy swaths of homes and then rent them back out, taking those homes off the market from potential, I'll say, first-time home buyers. I think there's also like an aspect of making more attractive places in the country to want to live too. I think there's so many factors in terms of like why is it expensive to live in some of the biggest cities in this country? It's because it's a fun place to live, right? There's a sense of culture and there's entertainment, maybe a sense of community, things like that. And not to say that doesn't exist in other towns and municipalities, but I think they're like, why do we limit ourselves to like 15 big cities in this country? I don't even know if that number's correct, but like, why can't we have like 40? You know, we have so much land. Like, why? I feel as though gone are the days of making new towns and cities. Like, remember back in the day, someone would go and start a town or a city. Like every town or city you've ever lived in, someone started that thing. When was the last time someone started a town?
Like this year, me and you are going to go start a town. That's what's going to happen. We don't know what we're going to call it yet, but you heard it here first, folks. We're going to find a unused piece of land here in the state of Texas, and we're just going to start a small town. That's what's going to happen. But no, I mean, that's valid, though, because, and I think the 15, I mean, I think you kind of got close on that number because, I mean, if you really think about it, you have like Los Angeles, Seattle, New York, Miami, Pennsylvania, Atlanta.
Well, Pennsylvania's a state, so.
Or not Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I'll say Pittsburgh. Yeah, Pittsburgh. Because, I mean, Pittsburgh and New York are obviously both in Pennsylvania, but you have both of those.
Well, New York's in New York.
Trying to think of what else was in Pennsylvania.
I mean, Pittsburgh's probably going to be the biggest. Philadelphia,
that's what I was trying to think of. Okay. They like, let's just say you go up to like, you don't really have anything in Montana. You don't really have anything in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Not that I know of anyways. Which, I mean, Montana is kind of a more of like it's all forest and trees and national park.
Yeah, a lot of it's a national park.
You have no one really talks about Denver in Colorado.
I mean, Denver's a happening place.
It is, but no one really.
It's expensive.
Yeah. Phoenix, Arizona. You have Las Vegas, but Las Vegas is like, that's not really a place you want, like you go to try to homestead it up.
Oh yeah, no, it's not. Yeah, the climate doesn't account for that.
Yeah. And then, I don't really know anywhere in New Mexico.
Santa Fe. I mean,
I say,
yeah, I wouldn't call them like major, like metropolises.
Yeah,
the Santa Fe and Albuquerque.
I say Albuquerque would probably be the more I'd probably say more well-known one. But I mean, yeah, you really don't have a lot like major places that people refer to unless just something happens that it makes the news because of that. So it's like, I mean, I think we really should like, instead of putting all of the cards into like the few specific areas that people are trying to grow, why don't you put those cards and dish them out amongst other places to make those other places like feasible or make them more attractive for people to move to grow that infrastructure and have that growth in the economy? Because right now, I mean, even if you talk about pay scales, which I mean, we could, like I said, we've talked about doing a whole episode just on the job market. So I'll kind of, I'm not going to go too far into it, but the standard pay rate for a lot of places, I mean, you still have minimum wages, but I mean, a lot of people typically would start off making more than that. But, no one can live off less than $20 an hour. 9 times out of 10, people say, oh, if you just budget the right way, that doesn't happen. Not with the cost of everything nowadays, and so it's, and again, that really is the $1 million question, actually the $1 trillion question as you phrased it, but how do you fix it? Like, how do you attain that American dream or whatever you feel like that American dream is? Like, how do you get to that point?
Yeah. And maybe that's a good question to ask the people if they're still listening at this point is like, what is your version of the American dream? And based on your definition, do you believe is even obtainable? Because like the way I view it, I don't think it's obtainable in the way that I perceive it, at least. Like it is if like, if you're lucky enough to to make a good decent chunk of change in life. But I think for the average American, like, it's not my version of the American dream that I kind of presented at the beginning. I don't think it's obtainable for the vast majority of the public these days. But yeah, that'd be something good for people to let us know about.
What is, because I know you told us like what the stereotypical version, what's your American dream? Like, what do you see as your American dream?
Yeah, no, I think it's the owning your own home. I think it's like, so it's different from like what I think the American dream is versus like what I just want out of my own life. But what I perceive the American dream as is like, it's that atomic family. It's the 2.5 kids, the dog and or the cat. You own your home, probably in suburbia. You got at least one car. You have one source of income, which is a steady, sustainable income. That's kind of it. Like, it's not saying that you're never going to be concerned about your finances, but there is a pathway to achieve that scenario. It really is just like what you think of as like the American family sitcom setup back in like the 50s, 60s.
I think the American dream can be attained. I don't think it's 100% dead. I just think you have to figure out what your American dream is, and then you have to do whatever you can to get to that point by any means. Like you have to be, because I mean, at the end of the day, the government's not going to take care of you for it, or if they do, then you're going to have to pay it back at some point. So it's just going to be another collection, but you have to really figure out what your American dream is. So again, we'd love to hear what your American dream is, what your version of the American dream is, and what you would like to attain in this life. And yeah, hope that we didn't scare too many people off. But this is just, like I said, this is what we think the American dream is, and if we think that it's attainable in today's society.
And we'll see y'all in the next one.